You want a podcast? Welcome to Flute 360, the podcast that reminds you everything is connected. I'm Dr. Heidi K. Begay, flutist, educator, creative entrepreneur, and follower of Christ. Here, we explore the full circle, the 360 of your life as a musician. Because who you are as a person shapes who you are as an artist. And the lessons you learn outside the practice room are just as vital as the hours with your flute in hand. From health and spiritual growth to artistry and career fulfillment, this space is where it all intersects. Come as you are. There's a seat for you at the Flute 360 table. Today's episode is episode 354, and it's titled, Stop Waiting for Perfect Conditions. Practice without the flute on your face. Hey there, friend. It's Heidi, and I can't wait to dive into today's podcast content. I think this topic resonates with every flutist on the planet. And it's this. Have you ever caught yourself saying, I don't have time to practice? If so, you're not alone. I totally feel you. Maybe you're juggling being a parent, an aunt or uncle, grandma or grandpa, teacher, a student, an author, a performer, and life can get super messy. But what if you invited the flute into your messy life? What if you felt free to play in the middle of the chaos instead of waiting for the perfect moment? Let's say, for example, you're a parent and you have a toddler learning to walk or play. You can absolutely play alongside them. You don't have to schedule a designated time away from your children. You can practice maybe 5 or 10 minutes while they build blocks or have some screen time. You don't need everything boxed out neatly in order to find time for your art. Although that is nice, if you work better in that setup, go for it. But your art can live inside your messy world too. And if you find yourself saying from time to time, I don't have time to practice, I'm too busy, I really, truly, genuinely empathize. Between running multiple businesses, being a cat mom, being a wife to Eric, being a flutist, a teacher, and a creative, I also struggle to find time myself. But this is where I want to encourage you. When you meet yourself where you are and walk with yourself gently on a daily basis, there's a softness, so to speak, that enters. Practicing then becomes something you invite into your natural world in a very organic way, instead of something you force. Even 5 or 10 minutes is great. Now, those short spurts, when they're focused and intentional, can do wonders for your playing. Now, you teachers out there, would you not agree with me? I would much rather have a flutist do 5 or 10 minutes of high quality practice work than spend hours practicing without intention. I know I'm not the only teacher in the room who feels this way. It's much better to be intentional, strategic, with short bursts of your time, rather than a huge allotted amount of time to practice while being distracted. When you are strategic with these short bursts of time, I think you'll move the needle further along because you're focused. Whereas someone with maybe lots of time may still find themselves doom scrolling on TikTok, checking text messages, responding to email messages, picking up the phone, or just drifting away into la la land. So a high quality practice is always more valuable than high quantity distracted practice. Here's this curiosity piece that I try to weave into my teachings. Here's the curious piece. Now, I encourage you to be curious when you hear yourself say, well, I can't practice. I don't have time to practice. I've talked about time and energy management in past Flute 360 podcast episodes. So feel free to browse the podcast library at your own leisure. But today, I want to go even deeper and ask, what do you consider to be practice worthy? A lot of my students and clients, they tell me that they feel like the only time they're, air quote, really practicing is when the flute is physically on their face. They will say things like, if I'm not playing, it doesn't count. That is so far from the truth. And for me, in my own little music world, I wish someone had told me that when I was younger. I didn't learn it until graduate school auditions when my time was incredibly limited. I discovered that some of my best practice sessions, and the same is true for my students, happened when the flute wasn't even on my face or in my hands. I want to encourage you to redefine what practice means for you. Now, I'm going to sound so old school when I say this, but who cares? We're all friends in this flute community. But one of my most favorite things to do is read my music score like a newspaper. I know, it's so old school, but imagine holding it up and reading the newspaper article, reading it from top to bottom, left to right, just like an article. Talk out the music score. Talk out about what's happening. Look at the form, the phrasing, the melody, the melodic lines, the harmonic lines. Reading your music like a newspaper is great practice. Now, the reason why I love this so much is because as you read and speak through the score, just like a newspaper article, you give your brain, your fingers, your body, a chance to digest the form, the musical structure, and perhaps the musical direction too. You can also sing the melodic lines, sing the harmonies if applicable, speak your phrases aloud, visualize how the notes feel under your fingers, imagine how the music moves through your body, writing out the story, speaking out the story, perhaps listening to recordings on YouTube, old school CDs, and maybe even using affirmations. All of these are valid and such meaningful forms of practicing away from your instrument. So, as you redefine what practice means for you, what other creative solutions can you come up with? Now, I just listed several, but you may find even more. Maybe you're listening to an orchestral excerpt within the full score to understand how your flute line interacts with the other woodwinds, string players, etc. Maybe you're fingering through difficult passages on a pencil. Maybe you're counting and clapping out the rhythms. These are all excellent forms of high quality practice. I remember way back in grad school when my schedule was incredibly tight with my teaching assistantship, commuting, teaching lessons, and being a very young wife. Finding practice time was really challenging. I wanted to balance my schoolwork, my personal work, my friends into a well-balanced schedule. And so finding time to practice was a bit of a challenge. I remember practicing double tonguing exercises while washing dishes or while getting ready for the day. Now, I will say that may not be the most ideal form of practicing because a lot of studies show humans really can't multitask well. So if I could go back in time to help out grad school Heidi, I would tell her of those studies. So if you're going to practice away from the flute, still make it intentional. What I've learned through reading, seeing the research, is that the brain can only handle so much at once. So the next time you find yourself saying, I barely have time to practice, where am I going to find this time? I don't have the time. Be gentle on yourself and be curious about those sentiments. Be curious about those statements. Be curious about the small spaces within your very human life where you can invite the flute in. Even if it's just a few minutes without taking the instrument out of its case. Practicing away from the face, I think, is just as important as practicing with the flute on your face. I hope that this information has served you well. I hope it has given you a boost of inspiration for your next practice session, whether short or long. Just make sure that it is strategic and intentional. And if you'd like more creative solutions for finding ways to bring your instrument into your everyday, very messy human life experience, we talk about these very things, these very topics, inside the Flute 360 Accelerator program. Our next scheduled event is for Saturday, December 20th, 2025, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time. A lot of international flutists, I will say, ask when Central Time is. So if you go to your world clock and find Dallas, Texas, or Chicago, Illinois, you have got Central Time right there locked in. So thank you so much for asking, because you never know until you hear those questions, and I love answering them. If you want to join to grab your Flute 360 seat, you definitely want to do that now, sooner rather than later, before you forget. The link to join is in the show notes below, or you can go to my website at heidikbegay.com/shop. See you later, my friend, and until next time. Let's talk about flute.